Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Jeanne Francine, giving you a live look. Southern Israel looking into Gaza as we transition to discuss the very latest of conflict in the Middle East. We are following breaking news at this hour. According to our content partners over at the Associated Press, a Palestinian health official says Israel released 55 Palestinians on Monday whom it had detained from Gaza. Now, this includes the director of the territory's main hospital. Israel accuses Hamas and other militant groups of sheltering in hospitals and using them for military purposes. Palestinian health officials saying Israeli raids have forced several hospitals to shut down or dramatically reduce services. They say this is endangering civilians. Hospitals can lose their protection under international law if they are used for military purposes. Joining us live this morning for this breaking news alert, national security expert with the University of New Haven, Ken Gray. Good morning to you, Ken. Happy Monday.
Good morning, Jeanne. Happy Monday to you, too.
Thank you. So happy to have you. So, Ken, learning this breaking news, very alarming. 55 Palestinians released by Israel this morning. But of those 55, the territory's hospital director, I know from the very beginning we were learning of those tunnels that Hamas was using and those tunnels going through schools and even hospitals. Paint this picture for us and provide this perspective. I'm sure it does lower morale to learn that hospital officials could potentially be aiding in terroristic things.
Sure. The person that was released that is of the most concern is Mohammed Abu Salmiya. Salmiya was the director of the Al-Shifa Hospital. And you will recall that the Al-Shifa Hospital had both hostages being held there at one point and had been a base of operations for Hamas. Also had an entrance into tunnels beneath the Al-Shifa Hospital. And so this was a big revelation that Hamas was using these hospitals, and the director was detained for allowing this to happen. He was one of a number of detainees from the Gaza Strip that were released on Monday morning there in Israel due to the fact that the detention facility was running out of room. The Shin Bet Security Service is responsible for holding these detainees. And the Shin Bet had been requesting additional funds to expand the detention facilities that they were using to hold detainees like this. And that request for additional funds was denied or had been tied up in bureaucracy. And therefore, their facility, which was only supposed to be a short-term detention facility used to hold detainees only for a short period of time, had too many people in it, and it was considered to be unsafe for that many detainees being held in that facility. So they had to conduct a threat assessment, determine who was the least threatening of the group being detained there, and release those that were the least threat. They also were holding West Bank detainees that they were concerned that if they released them, they would return to the West Bank and start their activities against the IDF again. Therefore, the director of the Al-Shifa Hospital was one of the ones who was released. However, because of the fact that the Al-Shifa Hospital was being used by Hamas, this has caused a large number of Israeli officials to start pointing fingers at one another as to who was responsible. Ben-Gvir is the minister that directs these operations. He called for the firing of the Shin Bet Security Service. Shin Bet points their fingers back at Ben-Gvir, saying that he had not responded to their request for additional funds. Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant both say this is not our area of responsibility. This is between Shin Bet and the head of that. And so there's a lot of people calling for heads to roll over the release of these detainees. But in actuality, these detainees were considered to be less of a threat than those others that were detained, continued to be detained there at this facility.
Absolutely. And there's also frustration from many of the Israeli people that this release happened. Meanwhile, some of their relatives are still in Hamas captivity. They were hoping that this would kind of be used as a bargaining tool to get those Hamas hostages released.
Yes, the efforts to try to release the hostages are still ongoing. Egypt has renewed their efforts to try to get those talks to restart again. But again, Hamas and Israel are very far apart over some of the details. One such detail is the total ceasefire versus a temporary ceasefire in military actions there. Hamas says that they will not release anyone unless there's a total ceasefire and the removal of IDF from the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, Israel says that they are going to continue their pursuit of neutralizing Hamas and that they will only call for a temporary ceasefire for the release of hostages, and then they will resume their activities in chasing down and neutralizing Hamas. And so I don't think this deal will actually ever go through, just simply because the two sides are very far apart and it's not in their interest to come to an agreement as far as the long range goals go.
Ken Gray, always a pleasure having you join us bright and early for these breaking news alerts. We know that the conflict with Israel and Hamas isn't the only one. Hezbollah, that conflict also increasing this morning. Before we let you go, are there any additions you'd like to bring to the table for the conflict in the Middle East?
I would like to point out that on Friday, Iran held their elections for a president. That nobody won more than 50% of the votes. So there is going to be a runoff. The runoff is going to be between the reformist lawmaker Masoud Pezeshkian and the former IRGC member Sayed Jalili, who is an ultra-conservative, and he was a nuclear negotiator, and he's considered to be a really hardliner. So he got 38% of the vote, and Pezeshkian got 40% of the vote. And so there's going to be a runoff between those two as to who's going to be president. But in actuality, it's the Ayatollah Khamenei that makes all the real long-term decisions for Iran.
Ken Gray, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for those updates, and we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on that because many people don't realize that those elections, they also impact U.S. relations right here in America. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday morning. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.